All right, Yuri, recording has started. Please introduce yourself and take it away.
All right, thanks, Steve. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Looks like the last session before the weekend starts for you all. I'm gonna try to be very precise on the message. My name is Yuri Diogenes. I'm a principal PM manager at the Azure Security Center Azure Defender team. And the presentation today is really about the Azure Security Center and Azure Defender for CSPM and CWPP, thinking about multi-cloud and thinking about a hybrid workload. So let's jump into the session and let's start talking about secure hygiene. It always starts with secure hygiene. It always starts with a good secure hygiene. Again, if you are, make sure to mute yourself. Looks like some people are not muted yet, so make sure to mute yourself. Thank you. All right, so why secure hygiene is so important? Well, the thing is, throughout the last couple of years, even more than that, but last couple of years really highlighted the importance to have a good secure hygiene. Not only our research team find that out, but also many other sources find out that threat actors are taking advantage of poor secure hygiene. And as customers are migrating to the cloud and not having the right secure controls, they leave workloads unprotected and they do not really enhance their secure posture overall. One of the things that we noticed also when we released our Microsoft Digital Defense report last year is that during the beginning of the pandemic last year, as you can see this uptick in March, we noticed a lot of threat actors starting to take advantage of the theme of the moment. And the theme of the moment at that time was coronavirus, COVID-19. It was unknown type of thing, not a whole lot of information. So they took advantage of that to craft phishing emails, campaigns, and send it out so that users could basically click and be hijacked or be compromised once once the threat actor was able to entice them to click on that email. Phishing email is a problem. It's not a new technique. It's actually a very old technique, but it still works because it involves social engineering. And most of the users, when they receive an email that is well crafted, they tend to click mainly during that time. So we notice that growth in phishing email coming from threat actors, but we also noticed that most of the things that they were trying to do, trying to exploit, could easily be prevented by having a good secure hygiene. In other words, ensuring that vulnerabilities were mitigated, patches were applied, services that were not used were disabled, basic secure hygiene. And that's where a lot of customers are failing to address, having a good secure hygiene. This is not something that only comes from Microsoft. As I said, this also came recently, January 14, 2021, from the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agents. And as you can see on this report, it again emphasizes that threat actors are utilizing phishing campaigns to exploit poor cybersecurity hygiene. So no matter what you really do from the threat detection perspective, if you do not have a good secure hygiene, chances are that you at some point is going to be compromised because that's the main target. Is really the low-hanging fruits, the things that administrators are not doing, mainly in a cloud-based environment, because in a cloud-based environment you have different workloads. Sometimes administrators, they do not have visibility across different workloads because they are not utilizing the correct secure controls. They are not utilizing a good cloud secure posture management platform. So the answer for that is really to improve the overall secure posture. To improve the secure posture, we need to tackle three major pillars. We need to ensure that we are addressing protection, detection, and response. Now, protection is everything that you do upfront proactively to reduce the likelihood that threat actors will exploit known vulnerabilities. It's basically the secure hygiene. So you do all this homework to increase your posture, ensure that everything that is supposed to mitigate you already do. And then at that point on, you start monitoring. And to monitor that, you need threat detection. Now, threat detection for cloud needs to be taken into consideration the different workloads. You cannot, when you are migrating to the cloud, you cannot just get your traditional IDS, traditional IPS that you have on premise and then move it to the cloud, because the analytics, the threat detection for that secure control are not really adequate to a cloud-based environment. There are different workloads, and each workload has a different threat landscape. If you think about a storage account, has a completely different threat landscape than a VM, than a key vault. So each workload requires a specific set of analytics. So the detection that we are talking about here are detection that needs to be created, taking into consideration the threat vector of each cloud workload. Once you introduce that to the environment, now you have visibility about what is happening from the reactive manner. So now you have proactive work and the protection, reactive work and the detection, and the last one that you need is the response. Okay, now that you detect an attempt to compromise, what you're gonna do? That's the response. And the ideal scenario, I'm gonna get here a pen real quick. The ideal scenario is that you're going to reduce the time between detection and response. So if you think about this circle should be actually right here, right? Because as soon as you detect, immediately you respond. If you have a gap, between detection and response, is a really big gap between those two, you are giving a chance to the threat actor to move within your device and your network. Let's say the threat actor was able to compromise using an RDP brute force attack. At that point, you receive already an alert. So what you're going to do needs to be very reactive. The response needs to be immediate so that you can isolate that resource and avoid the threat actor to move to another device or move to another equipment on your network. So you need to reduce the time to respond. Once you respond to that threat and you mitigate and everything is fine, now you have to feed this back into protection, because that's why this is a circle, right? This is a life cycle. This is an ongoing process. Everything that you learn from that incident must be incorporated into your protection mechanism. You have to do a post-mortem analysis of that incident and think about, okay, why did this happen? Did this happen in the first place? It was because the threat actor was able to exploit something. Is this something that he was able to exploit should be protected? Where did we fail, right? So you should not miss the opportunity of an incident to not learn from it. It's very important, because that's how you continue improve your secure posture, and everything is about continuous improvement. So that's the life cycle that we are referring to. Now, as you look this even broadly, from the broad perspective, you need to think about things that you do from the protection standpoint to reduce the likelihood of being compromised. And one of the things that you can incorporate right away is the principles that were established by Zero Trust. So Zero Trust, I'm not going to go into the details about Zero Trust. There are different presentations only about that. I just want to touch on the core principles. The core principles of Zero Trust is verify explicitly, least privilege, and assume breach. You need to incorporate those things into your secure posture to ensure that when it comes to verify explicitly, you are utilizing a platform that is not just going to authenticate a user. It will take in consideration a series of factors. For example, if the user is traveling, where this user is located at some point in time, if the user is in a location that there is a high threat of botnet in that particular location, and the authentication needs to be smart to rationalize and say, okay, if this user is trying to connect from this location, then I'm going to reduce the amount of privilege of these users while he is remote. Or even if he is in a high critical location that is very susceptible to attack, say, okay, from that location, you can only access these field documents. So what we call conditional access control, being able to analyze the different types of conditions and then establish the access based on that. So this is one of the things that can be done from this principal perspective. The other things is data classification, taking consideration, for example, well, the Steve never really accessed this document. Now he is traveling to this suspicious location. Now he is accessing this document, which has sensitive information on it. So this is an anomaly. This is something that it shouldn't happen. It's a suspicious activity. So you need to have an intelligent identity control management that allows you to implement that. The other thing is the least privilege, which is not a new concept in security. To the contrary, is an old concept. We are only taking this to the next level because now it's not only about only provide the privilege that you need for a resource, but also only provide access to that resource in particular period of time and just when you need. For example, if you're provisioning a virtual machine to be accessed from the internet, we already know that one of the most high level of attacks that takes place on IIS VMs are RDP and SSH brute force attack. It's really the number one type of attack against VMs that are exposed to the internet. The management ports are exposed. So why should I expose my management ports on this VM if I know that there is this high risk? So I'm going to keep those ports closed, and I will only open when it's necessary. In other words, just in-time access, of to those VMs, and just enough access as well. Or you only access what you really need. So these are some of the things that you must be thinking about when talking about least privilege. And the last one is the assume breach, which is almost like a mindset that we been talking about for a long time now, which is, okay, the old method of fortress protection, which is no one is going to compromise my environment because I'm 100% secure. We know that 100% security is something that is not achievable. We need to actually increase the controls to reduce the likelihood of compromise. But knowing that at some point we may get compromised, because by changing the mindset to say we may get compromised at some point, you start to establish an action plan of what to do if you get compromised. So now you have the third pillar that I was mentioning in the previous slide, which is the response. Okay, you detected that something happened, you're going to respond quickly. That whole thing is part of the assume breach mentality. You need to establish a plan of action to quickly respond. And you also need to take in considerations that if you get compromised, ideally the threat actor will not be able to compromise your data. So make sure that you have encryption in place, make sure that you have network segmentation in place, things that will de-accelerate the process of compromise and also prevent the threat actor to compromise some resources and data. So where Azure Security Center fits into this, it fits into the category of Cloud Secure Posture Management, CSPM. On the CSPM standpoint is really the prevention, the protection, the homework that needs to be done. And as I said, everything is about continuous improvement. So when you create a new subscription in Azure, Security Center will analyze that subscription and it will give you what we call the security score. Yeah, the security score is basically a way for you to measure the secure state of your workloads at that point in time. So it's an excellent way for you to measure how secure you are, knowing that 100% secure score means that all the secure recommendations that you have were already remediated. So you increase your protection, you increase your secure posture. So what happens is over time, you start to remediate those recommendations and you are going to increase your secure score. The result is as you increase the secure score, you're going to have a secure posture that is much better than before. And the amount of secure recommendations will drop because now you have less things to remediate. So you need to continue this journey to achieve 100%, which is the ideal number. That's the ideal number for the secure score because you should be addressing all the security recommendations that are available. So use this as your cloud security KPI. What we notice is that a lot of organizations that are not still very mature in the cloud, they don't have good governance. And governance is very important when we are on this journey to the cloud because it allows you to control the things that you're provisioning. So let's go for an example of a scenario where customer it does not have a good governance in place, and he starts remediating the security score, and he is already in 67%. He's making progress, but now some of machines were provisioning, some storage accounts were provisioning, which is completely normal. Is the dynamics of the cloud to always provision new resources, and now the security score dropped to 23%. Why is that? Well, this is because these new workloads that were deployed are not using secure best practice by default. In other words, there is no governance in place to prohibit a workload owner to provision a new resource. So when he provision a new resource, that resource is using an unsecure configuration, and when security center scan that resource, it identified that there is a bunch of new security recommendations to remediate, and then it drops the security score. So this happens a lot, and the only way to really address this is when you start to align a good governance, adding those guardrails in the beginning of the pipeline to avoid this type of behavior to take place, ensuring that resources are provisioning securely by default. The same thing happens not only in Azure, but if you think about a multi-cloud, the likelihood that this is happening is even bigger. That's why Security Center has the capability to manage resources that are in different cloud providers. We currently have connectors for GCP and AWS, which means that you are going to be able to connect Security Center to AWS and GCP, and then start ingesting the platform-related data from those cloud providers into one single dashboard. So you're going to use Security Center dashboard as your main dashboard for cloud security posture management. Not only for the recommendations, but you also have other capabilities such as threat protections for VMs using Azure Defender for VMs. I will get there later on. You also can trigger automations that to respond to new recommendations that are located in different cloud providers. But the main point here is the utilization of Security Center as your central repository to see the cloud secure posture management of Azure, AWS, and GCP as well. Oh, that's the idea. And of course, when we are talking about hybrid, we also talk about on-prem, because as customers they migrate to the cloud, many times they keep some resources on-prem. So we need to also monitor those resources, and Security Center can be used for that as well. The other platform is the Cloud Workload Protection Platform, the CWPP. Now, before I jump into the CWPP, I want to do a quick demo here about the CSPM capability, the Cloud Secure Posture Management capabilities. If we look at here on this initial dashboard, we have the security score that I mentioned, and when we click here on the left, we have the recommendations. So the recommendations, they are organized in security controls, and those security controls are organized in a top-down approach, which means that the security controls that you remediate here, they will give you this amount of points on your security score. So you know that as soon as I finish remediating this, I'm going to get 10 points. As soon as I finish remediating this, I'm going to get 8 points, and that's so on. So that's why we do a top-down approach, because the top one will give you more points. So as you can see here, I already remediate everything in green. And then you say, well, but there are some others that are not remediated. And the reason why those others do not count is because of this little flag that you see here. This flag basically means that this recommendations is in public preview. And you can filter that. You have an option here called recommendation maturity. And you can say, oh, I want to see only the GA recommendations. Once you do that, then you're not going to see the ones with a flag, which are public preview. So assuming that we want to focus only on GA recommendations, then as soon as you remediate everything, it's going to reflect on your security score. So as you can see, enable MFA, security management ports is fully remediated, and now comes the rest of the recommendations that needs to be remediated one by one. Okay, so this is basically how you remediate. This is basically how you remediate the recommendations, and you increase your security score. Now, there are some recommendations that you have this thunderbolt here, which means that as soon as you click on the recommendation, you'll be able to select the resource and then click on fix if you have the right privilege. Noticeable here, I do not have the right privilege because as soon as I selected the resource, the fix button is not available. So, but assuming that you have the right privilege and you have that thunderbolt, you will be able to quickly mitigate and remediate this from here, right? There are other recommendations that you don't have this capability, so you need to manually execute the installation of the resource. For example, enable disk encryption. When I click on virtual machine, it should have disk encryption enable. I do not have a quick fix here. So once I select a VM, I need to use the steps that are documented here to remediate that, okay? Or I could trigger a logic app. Logic app is an automation that exists in Azure. So you could create an automation to do this work for you. So you could click here and then trigger the logic app. The whole point is we want to increase the security score. That's the whole idea of the recommendations, is really to give you the capabilities to reach 100%. Also, just to mention that if you look at here, you will see that there are some recommendations that are only best practices. In other words, they do not have a score attached to it. So this two last one, for example, these are secure best practices. So it's more like low priority things that you should be doing, but if you don't do, at least it's not part of the critical ones that count towards the security score. Okay. So that's a little overview of the CSPM approach that we use. Now, when it comes to cloud workload protection, what is this? Well, I just mentioned in the beginning that threat actors are utilizing poor cybersecurity hygiene to compromise resources. When they compromise resources, they are really targeting cloud workloads. And here are some examples of the rise in cyber attacks against cloud services. And different workloads have different ways to attack, different threat vectors, as I also mentioned in the beginning. So your analytics, they must be created taking those things in consideration. So what we do on Azure Security Center is we have an option for you to upgrade to Azure Defender. And as you upgrade to Azure Defender, you are able to select which workloads you want to protect. You can protect Azure SQL using the Azure Defender for SQL. You can protect servers and VMs using the Azure Defender for servers, Azure Defender for containers, app services, and things like that. All our analytics, they are very well created thinking about the entire cyber kill chain. So the idea is that you can receive alerts in the beginning of the attack operation. Let's say the threat actor is coming from here, is doing some SQL injection or SSH brute force attack, but it's the beginning of the journey to really compromise the environment. This is considered the target and attack phase. If we detect something in that phase, we will trigger an alert, and then you can take an action right in the beginning, because now you avoid the threat actor from moving to the next phase, which is the installation exploitation. And we also have alerts that were created and mapped for the installation and exploitation phase, as well as to the post-breach phase. So if you are not able to catch the threat actor in the beginning, you still have chances throughout the cyber kill chain to identify other operations. So that's the overall idea of how the alerts are created. Now, Azure Defender for Server. When it comes to Azure Defender for Server, what we are doing here is we are working based on different levels of threat detection. The first one, if you think about, is the anomaly detection. Well, the anomaly detection, basically what it does is it utilizes statistical profiling to understand what is normal. For example, let's say that you have a VM that has Exchange installed on it, and there is an amount of SMTP traffic that is happening every day. If one day that SMTP traffic starts to spike, and now you have really a lot of SMTP traffic, this is probably a suspicious operation that is taking place. So the anomaly detection will double check this scenario with our threat intelligence. So we always try to double check based on our threat intel. And the reason behind that is because you want to increase the level of certainty that this is a true positive. We want to ensure that we are not triggering false positive alerts. And when we cross information with our threat intel, we have now more certainty that, yes, this is suspicious traffic because it's going to a certain IP address that, according to our threat intelligence, this IP address is actually part of a botnet network, for example. Now I have the certainty, okay, that this is something that I should trigger an alert. So then I trigger the alert on the dashboard, and then you have visibility for that. So this is one way that an alert could be triggered. The other one is based on behavior analytics. Now, the behavior analytics is a bit different, because now instead of using the machine itself and the behavior of the machine itself to identify the suspicious activity, we actually use the actions that a potential threat actor is doing. If you think about the way that the threat actor will compromise is basically an execution of multiple commands. So if we see a series of commands being triggered coming from a VM in a certain order, this could be an indication of a potential attack. And this could be right in the beginning of the attack, could be a reconnaissance. The threat actor might be trying to do a reconnaissance internally, trying to identify user accounts, even doing NS lookup, which is a super normal built-in Windows command, but a NS lookup followed by a series of other commands is a suspicious activity. So that's very powerful, because now we are not looking at, basic signatures. We are looking at the overall behavior that many threat actors, they usually have by executing sequences of commands and commands that are doing specific things. So we look at this, we cross information with our threat intel again, and then we trigger the alert in case we identify. The other capability that it is available is also called Fusion. The idea behind Fusion is really to help analysts, SOC analysts, for example, to better triage the alerts. Because here an example. If you think about the scenario where the threat actor started the attack via RDP brute force and then move on to drop a suspicious command prompt into the machine, and from that point on start to do some other operations such as account enumeration and lateral movement. These operations will be done and will trigger multiple alerts. So now as a security analyst, I have tons of alerts to analyze, and I need to correlate those alerts. Without a automated data correlation capability such as Fusion, it will be really hard to say, okay, this RDP brute force is actually linked to this suspicious CMD, which is actually doing this. So what the Fusion will do for you is create this correlation automatically and create a secure incident based on that data correlation. So a very powerful capability that allows multiple alerts to be aggregated as a single security incident. Okay, and then you can see that on the dashboard. Azure Defender has different plans. And the advantage of this is because you can pick and choose the plans that you really want to enable. If you, for example, only have servers in SQL, Azure SQL in your environment, then you're going to enable just Azure Defender for Server and Azure Defender for SQL, right? As you start onboarding new workloads, for example, Kubernetes, then you enable Azure Defender for Kubernetes. Okay, now I have also MariaDB. Okay, let me enable, Azure Defender for open source database such as MariaDB, and that goes on and on. So it's very granular, exactly for the reason that you will be able to pick and choose the plans that are peculiar for your scenario, and not only from, the compute perspective, but also from the platform perspective. For example, Azure management. One of the things that we notice over time that is been growing a lot is threat actors that are trying to compromise system by first starting the attack through the Azure Resource Manager platform. If they are able to get into the Azure Resource Manager for your subscription, they will be able to even disable antivirus without even logging to the machine, just by disabling the extension by doing Azure Resource Management calls. So you want to have visibility for that as well. We also have Key Vault, Azure Network Layer Protection. Well, these are some of the plans. Now let's cover the main ones. Azure Defender for Server. When you enable Azure Defender for Server in your subscription, you will get a series of capabilities for you. You will get the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, but in this case for server, which is available for Windows and Linux as well. You get threat protections for Windows and Linux, and you get a series of other capabilities such as vulnerability assessment, just-in-time VM access, which is what I mentioned before on the Zero Trust, adaptive application control, which is a way for you to have visibility if users are trying to utilize applications that are not supposed to run on a machine. So you create what we call the allow list of applications to run, and every time that you run an application that is not in the allow list, you receive an alert. We have also file integrity monitoring capability to analyze if files are getting changed. The overall network map that allows you to see in a map how your network infrastructure looks like, and if you have open points available to the internet. And adaptive network hardening, which allows you to have intelligent selection of rules for the network level. In addition to that, you also get all the cloud connectors in case you want to connect with AWS or GCP, you'll be able to, by using Azure Defender for Server, and regulatory compliance in case you really want to see things more from a specific standard point of view. Instead of utilizing security score, for example, you could say, oh no, we need to be PCI compliant. So I want to see how I'm progressing to be fully PCI compliant, at least from the premises that the security center allow me to monitor. Okay. Well, these are the things that you get. Now let me go real quick here for the demo environment again. Going back to the main dashboard here. To go to Azure Defender, you basically come to the left navigation pane and click on Azure Defender. This is the main Azure Defender dashboard. And from here, you see the different workloads that I have in my subscription. I have servers, I have Kubernetes, I have containers, I have services. And if the way that I pick and choose which ones I want to monitor is via the price and settings. When I go to the price and settings and select the subscription, then I have the option to enable Azure Defender for different workloads based on the selection that I have. So it's taking a little time here. Let me open another portal real quick here while this one is loading. So it's loaded here. So I can choose on or off, right? For servers, SQL database, so you on or off. So you have the pricing of each plan here, and you can select on or off status for that particular workload. And this is for the entire subscription, okay? Going back to the Azure Defender dashboard, the other thing that is important here is the vulnerability assessment. It's part of the Azure Defender for Server. So when you onboard a machine, you will be able to install the vulnerability assessment, which can be powered by our own TVM solution or can also be powered by Qualys integration. And this is included in the price. So once you enable the vulnerability assessment, you'll be able to start obtaining information about vulnerabilities on each machine. In this case here, there are a bunch of machines that do not even have vulnerability assessment enabled yet. So we have a recommendation that says you should enable vulnerability assessment on those machines, okay? Once you enable that, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to the recommendation and you're going to remediate, right? Vulnerabilities in your virtual machine should be remediated. And here is the location where you see a set of rules that the security checks that were done, okay, based on different CVEs available and the affected resources. So now you know that all these machines, they are vulnerable to those CVEs here, and you need to take an action to remediate that. In this case, there are a series of KB articles that needs to be deployed to those machines in order to mitigate, to remediate that. Okay. So very important. The vulnerability assessment does not look only into the OS itself. It looks also beyond the OS. So if I start to go down the list here, I will see that I also have Internet Explorer. Okay. I have Red Hat in case you are monitoring Linux. So this is a platform that allows you to obtain vulnerability information, not only for Windows, but for Linux as well. Okay, so let's go back to the demo, to the slides, and let's talk a little bit about Azure Defender for SQL. In the case of Azure Defender for SQL, we noticed that it is a big target. SQL database is a big target for threat actors. We are seeing a lot of increase. SQL injection, for example, although it's an old attack, is still growing because the main problem with SQL injection is not lack of protection, is lack of hygiene into the code. So many organizations that they are developing solutions, they do not incorporate secure development lifecycle into their code. So they develop things that are not secure. They publish applications that talk to the database, and those applications are not doing the basic hygiene of data input. And that's when SQL injection become a problem. So with the Azure Defender for SQL, you have detection for that. You also have detection for brute force against the database. You have threat detection based, threat intelligence based threat detection, different variants of anomaly detection, and native capabilities to connect with Azure Sentinel, which is our SIEM solution. Now, there is a vulnerability assessment specific for database. The same way that we have one that I shown in the previous slide for servers, VMs, you also have one specifically for database, because a database on its own can have multiple misconfigurations that can lead to secure breaches. So you need to leverage the vulnerability assessment available on Azure Defender for SQL to understand what the vulnerabilities are and what to do to remediate. The Azure Defender for SQL has different plans, not only Azure SQL, but also SQL on machine. So if you have a VM and you install SQL, even if this VM is not in Azure, you still can utilize the Azure Defender for SQL anywhere. If your machine, for example, is in AWS and you have SQL on that machine, you will be able to leverage Azure Arc to onboard that machine and then enable Azure Defender for SQL to monitor that machine. And now you will have coverage not only for your Azure workloads, but also for a SQL server that is running in a VM in AWS, for example. These three are the latest ones that were added, which is part of the open source relational database threat detection. And these are the three plans that are available for Azure Defender for SQL. The Azure SQL Database, which is a PaaS service, the SQL Server on machines, also based on Microsoft SQL Server, and the open source relational database. Remember, when you enable this, when you turn on, there is nothing really to do to be concerned about performance or anything, because those things are enabled on the back end. And that's the beauty about PaaS services, is that you just enable on the back end and then you see the final result on the front end. So there is nothing really to be concerned about, oh, should I enable this only over the weekend, should not cause any performance degradation. This is not going to affect that. The advantage of utilizing Azure Defender for SQL anywhere via this integration is that you have pure centralized management via Azure Security Center. You are going to be able to see every machine that has SQL and is being managed from a single dashboard. You're going to have recommendations and you're going to have threat detection. Now, Azure Defender for AKS. So Kubernetes is an area that is very new. There are a lot of people that work with Kubernetes but don't really know deeply how to secure a Kubernetes. So the Azure Defender for Kubernetes has this advantage of continuous discovering new AKS instances that were deployed on the subscription and start to create recommendations that are based on secure best practices for those Kubernetes clusters that are going to get available on that subscription. And then trigger threat detection alerts in case something happened. So we have to trigger those things. We look at the audit log from the control plane perspective, and then we look for the raw security events that are available on each node. So by combining those two information, we are able to give threat detection from the node perspective as well as to the control plane perspective. There's a very deep look into the stack in order to raise the alerts. In addition to that, we have Kubernetes protection via Hygiene, okay? Runtime threat detection. This is something that it is available, and you can have you will need to have Azure Defender for Server enabled on that cluster to take advantage of this runtime threat detection, and admission control policy also available for Kubernetes. These are some of the capabilities that are available. On the admission control policies, is the way that it is portrayed to you is via a recommendation. You see a recommendation similar to this one, okay? And then this recommendation is going to give you more insights about the containers image that should be deployed from a trust registry repository. And then it will give you a list of affected resources here, okay? Now, there are a series of things that I want to make sure that you take away from this, the go-dos for you. First of all, ensure that you activate Azure Security Center in all subscriptions. Azure Security Center on itself is a free service. So you have free secure posture management available in Azure. You just need to activate Security Center, go to the recommendation and start to remediate. Is a system that will scan the subscription and provide recommendations for you. There is absolutely no reason to just ignore this, because if you just ignore this, your security posture is going to be really suffering, and the likelihood that you're going to be compromised because of those vulnerabilities is really high. So use the free tier and start to remediate those recommendations. Now, if you need threat detection, what you will do is you enable Azure Defender. So as I said, you go to the Azure Defender, you go to the price and settings, select the subscription, and then select the plans that you really want. The advantage is you have 30 days trial. So even if you select, for example, Azure Defender for Server, the first 30 days that you are testing this service, you're not going to pay anything. So it's a great moment for you to do a proof of concept and analyze to see if there is anything that needs to be done, or if this service is really good for you. Depend on the size of your organization. If you have a red team, you can say, okay, now that I have this enabled, I want the red team to try to attack my machines and see how Azure Defender will trigger alerts. A very common scenario. We also have documentation on how to do a proof of concept for each one of those Azure Defender plans. At that point on, if you have multi-cloud, then go ahead and enable the connector. Connect to AWS, connect to Google Cloud, let the information flow, and then see the advantage, because what you're gonna really see is when you navigate into the recommendations, you'll be able to say, okay, I want to see only recommendations for AWS. And then you will see only recommendations that are for the AWS environment, right? So that's the good thing about analyzing everything from a single dashboard, is that you can pick and choose which cloud provider you want to see at some point in time to see if there are recommendations available for the workloads that you have there. Make sure to review the top 5 security controls in Azure, right? The security controls that I mentioned before here. Managing access permissions, always on the top down, okay, approach. Start to remediate as much recommendations as you can, so you can start your journey to improve your security score. And if you are utilizing a SIEM platform to ingest alerts, let's say you have Splunk or you have QRadar or any other SIEM platform, you can start ingesting those alerts. The alerts in Azure Defender, they appear under secure alerts. So when I look here under secure alerts, I have all the alerts that are taking place. Now, keep in mind, again, alerts are reactive, which means that this attack already took place. So when you are looking to this, the Kubernetes exposed Kubernetes service detected, this is a detection, which means that it already happened, right? So it's very reactive. We organize the alerts to give you the insights via the description. And we also give the affected resources and the metric attack tactics that you are at that point on. This one maps to the initial phase of the metric framework. Now, if I want to see more details about this attack, I can go in view full details, and then I can see which service name was affected, the username that was utilized for this operation, the resources that were compromised on that operation. So I have the information here as well. And I can see also something else in take action. So when I go to take action, I have the steps to mitigate this alert. And I have also recommendations on how to prevent this to happen again in the future. Now, if you remember the secure posture lifecycle that I told you is make sure that you get the lessons learned from an incident to enhance your protection. That's exactly it, because here it is saying, look, you have this open recommendation here. And most likely, if you have done this alert would not take place in the first place, right? Because it would not be exposed. So as you can see here, there are a bunch of alerts related to exposed Kubernetes. They are all medium severity, but still, it's a lot of alerts. In my case, I have other alerts here. If I go to page 2, most of those are related to Kubernetes, as you can see. I have privileged container detected, which is another type of alert. And this one gives different sets of insights, which is very important for you to comprehend that each alert has different metadata. The metadata of the alerts are related to that particular attack and the information that is available for that attack. But the take action is always there. There are situations like this one that there is no direct correlation between recommendation and the attack itself. Okay, so the insights of each alert will vary according to the alert type. Very important to know that. Now, when you're provisioning the subscription for the first time, you will not see this bunch of alerts, right? Hopefully not, because it means that no one is attacking your environment. But believe it or not, I've seen cases where customer was doing a POC, they enable Azure Defender for server, for Kubernetes, and then one day goes by, 3 days, 4 days, and the guy calls back and say, I don't have any alert. I'm very disappointed with the platform. I said, look, you don't have alerts because no one is attacking you. So you shouldn't be sad that you are not getting attacked. However, if you really want to just test the platform, just to see the alerts, there is something called the sample alerts. So you can trigger some sample alerts just to see how it looks like. That's one option. The other option is if you have a red team, go ahead and ask for the red team to attack one of these resources, because at least it's a controlled type of pen test simulation. If you don't have a red team, then you can go to our community site. When I go to the community here and click on the GitHub, on our GitHub site, we have a series of simulations, right? So we wrote different simulations for different workloads. And you can just go on each article and follow the steps to simulate an attack against that workload. Okay, so there are plenty of options for you to validate the scenario as you are going through the POC. Okay, I'm gonna open up for Q&A since we have only 5 minutes left. If you have any question, please unmute and ask a question.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's typed any questions in the chat. I'm seeing we're having some technical issues with it.
Yeah, if you don't have any question, I'm gonna share one more slide here, which is the resources. So this is our documentation. All the AK's links, really easy to memorize, but if you wanna get a screenshot here, pretty easy too. I have a bi-weekly show on our Microsoft Secure YouTube channel called Azure Security Center in the Field, where I interview developers, engineering PMs, feature owners about different capabilities. So usually it's 15 to 20 minutes episode with different PMs talking about Security Center. If you want to ramp up and learn more about Azure Security Center, Azure Defender, we have the Ninja training. So you can go to the Ninja training and take the training and then do an assessment so you can get the certificate. We have a full lab that you can do basically for free. You can provision a free trial of Azure subscription and do the entire lab. It's a totally hands-on. It helps you to understand more about Azure Security Center. And these are the other websites that you can use as well. But with all this information here, you are able to ramp up and learn more about Azure Security Center.
All right. Thank you very much. I see that Caden has put the link to the survey. Please do take a few moments to fill out the survey. There is a spot that if you want to put your email address in the survey, because the survey is anonymous, but the spot there for the email address is if you want us to get back so we can give you more information about this topic, please take a moment and put your email address there. Yuri, thank you for taking the time to spend with us on this late Friday afternoon. I truly appreciate it. And unless you have any other things, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Oh, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.